and welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today we are going to talk about collective grief. This is something that has been on my mind a lot recently and probably unknown to yourself, yours as well. So first off, what is collective grief? The name pretty much says it all. Collective grief is when a large group of people are all grieving the same thing, mostly. And I will go through a million examples here in a moment, but like I said, it's pretty self-explanatory. Collective grief is a grief that a large group of people is all experiencing at the same time. And I say this has been on my mind a lot recently, mostly because I've been in conversations with some organizations to provide grief support for employees. And we'll just start going into examples now. One of the things I think we all know, and we all understand, is the strain on our healthcare workers. That's been in the news a lot since COVID, and still to this day. And we're noticing now a shortage of healthcare workers because they're burnt out. And they're overworked, and they're being treated like crap, and they're leaving their jobs, which who can blame them? But they are all experiencing a collective grief of their own, that their way of life, their livelihood, what they've done for so long has changed so dramatically because of everything that's happened in the last few years. There are just so many examples out there. Last fall, we watched people in the UK, but really all over the world, collectively mourning the loss of Queen Elizabeth. And, you know, whether you're from the UK or not, it was a significant loss, whether you believe in their political system or how they run things over there. That's neither here nor there. This Queen Elizabeth II was an icon for so many people. And you know, obviously not always good. There are a lot of issues with that. Again, I'm not going to get into the politics of it. An influential being, human, died. And a lot of people were impacted by that, good or bad. And they mourned together. There would be people lined up. I saw photos and videos on the news and online of people that were standing in line for days practically to pay their respects. So that's huge. Like how beautiful that is, you know, for so many people to show their respect that way. But there are a lot of other things going on. I'm not going to say like the world today is so crazy, it's worse than it's ever been. It's not. We've things people don't always look into, or we've in periods of history and pretty much consistently, it always feels like the world's falling apart, right? There's always something going on. And like in my lifetime, it feels like it's gotten worse, but I wasn't around 100 years ago or 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago when other giant events have happened that have changed the course of the world, you know? But there's a lot going on right now. There's been we can all agree, again, politics aside, there's been a huge uptick in violence, specifically gun violence, and a lot of hate crimes, which again, hate crimes are not new, people. These have been around for ever, basically, and more available media that we can consume and see this, we're seeing it more. But we're also like weather changes. Again, I'm not going to get into the politics of climate change and everything, but our weather has been changing. We've had the warmest collective earth temperature records have been hit consecutively multiple times this year. And we're having a lot of weather events with that are causing. I had an episode on grief and natural disasters. I believe that was episode 17 if you want to go back and listen to it. But currently, as I'm recording this, is probably old news by the time I post this one, but there's been some massive flooding in Vermont. My husband and I were planning to go back out there. I don't know if we are or not. By the time this airs, we'll either be there or we won't be there. But we were planning to go back out to finish hiking the Long Trail, but they've closed the Long Trail currently. They've pulled all their employees out, and but you know, huge natural disasters like that, entire communities are affected and they're grieving the loss of infrastructure, homes, farms. There are so many farms that had entire fields destroyed with their floods. It's crazy. So there's a lot going on pretty much at any time. The world is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be, everything's hunky-dory everywhere. But so at any given time, there will be communities and groups that are experiencing collective grief. So what do we need to know about collective grief? Well, first of all, we're all going to feel it at some point. And much like your individual grief, there's a lack of control. There's feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. And there will be anticipatory grief possibly leading up to it. I mean, it's all very similar to individual grief. We're just feeling it with a large collective group. Okay, well, like a lot of things with what I do, education. First, let's educate ourselves. Let's understand. We know what collective grief is. What's the nature of it? What are we doing? And where do we go from here? First thing, we know what it is now. And we can also understand that we are not alone in this grief and that other people are experiencing it with us. So the other important thing to understand is how we are going to experience this grief and how we're going to cope with it, how we're going to work with it, right? Which we'll get into what to do and coping and all that. But it's super important to understand. I'm always saying that, grief is not a linear, it's not a step process, it's not a straight line, it's not an easy workflow. Grief is all over the place, and there's a lot of back and forth with this. And nothing is fully sustainable to feel and experience one thing with grief forever, okay? And in situations like a lot of the examples I just talked about with violence and hate crimes and even natural disasters, the thought of learning to accept it feels gross, at least to me. Like, I grieve every time I hear about a mass shooting or any type of mass or even individual violent event. But it's hard for me to accept it and move forward because it feels like accepting it is like saying, well, it's just going to happen, right? No, it shouldn't. I think we can all kind of agree with that this type of violence shouldn't happen. If you don't agree with that and you think violence should happen, maybe you're listening to the wrong podcast right now. And maybe you need to think about things. But so I'm hoping anybody listening would agree that this isn't something we can just accept and sit back and say, well, that's that, like anything else. So there's going to be times of mourning, of sadness, of feelings of helplessness. And there's going to be times of anger and hurt and outrage. And these are all okay. These are all perfectly okay to feel, okay? Especially anger when it comes to things like violence. But it can also make us feel sometimes scared, a little bit numb, or confused. Like, well, what do I do? This thing happened to a large group, and whether I was impacted or not, what do I do? And there might be, and again, I'll get into, ways to cope, but let's talk about community action for half a second. If that's something you want to get into, that's great. But we have to understand that there's still going to be waves with our grief. We're going to have days where we don't want to think about it. And we don't want to go to that protest march, or we don't want to go to that picket line. We don't want to sign that petition. And that's okay. You can't be in that mode all the time forever. It's not sustainable. It's honestly not healthy. So, let's say another mass shooting has happened, and it probably will, and you want to start, you want to work on some type of movement on gun regulations, and that's totally up to you. You don't have to, but if that's something you want to do and you're passionate about, you go for it. But understand that you can't be that person, that advocate, 24/7, 365. You're going to have times where you're feeling defeated, and you're feeling helpless, and you're tired, and you're sad, and you're depressed. That's okay. And also understand, you're not going to feel that way forever. You're not going to feel sad and depressed forever. You're going to have days where you're feeling energized and you want to do something to help. So just understanding that these vacillations back and forth are totally normal. You will experience them and they're okay. And it's actually helpful because being in one mode forever can be very detrimental to your mental health. Okay. Something else to keep in mind and to know, again, education is the best. Consider your physical being, okay? Your physical health, your physical being. Whenever we experience a trauma or a loss, there are involuntary things that happen. Like I've talked about this a lot in the past, like, the physical response in the body. So pay attention to those things, but also there are certain things to keep in mind, like especially if it comes to natural disasters or a situation of violence, of your safety. Listen to your body. Is it telling you that are you getting your fight, flight, freeze response activated? Listen to your body. Do you feel safe? Is there something you need to do to make yourself feel safe again? Okay. It's super easy for all these things to get triggered though. And there's no imminent danger, but these things can still get triggered in your body. But listen to yourself, listen to your body and know what's going on there. Okay. All right. So what can we do? How can we process and heal ourselves with collective grief? Okay. Well, a real easy thing is public and group collective mourning. Like I talked about the example with Queen Elizabeth at the beginning, and there were people lined up for days to pay their respects, and people gathered together. There are vigils. You'll see candlelight vigils to pay respect to somebody who may have been injured or a group of people that may have been affected or hurt. So come together in groups. Mourn together, mourn in public. Let people see that a community is hurting, but there's also a solidarity to it. It's like, it's not just me, it's all of us. We're all hurting. Okay. And yeah, I said public vigils a couple times. Like that's a beautiful way to all come together and just recognize and look around and say, we're all grieving. That's a beautiful thing. Just again, I always talk about like group therapies and things like that. Sometimes just there's, like I said, a solidarity or a feeling of community, and it can help to know that there are other people hurting besides just you. There's community action. I talked about that. If there's something happening, and this can mean a lot of different things. This can mean, good old-fashioned protest, petitions, things like that, but also coming together as a community to physically do something, as far as like, if it was a natural disaster, getting your community together to do something, help with a cleanup effort, give out food to people who may have lost their homes, just, do something as a community to help. Okay. And what else? Give yourself some grace. I say this all the time. If you need that day or that time to just chill and not deal with it, do it. Absolutely. Give yourself some space, give yourself some grace, and just recognize that this isn't going to go away and you're not going to get over this in a certain period of time. Give yourself some space. Understand that, know that. Just be kind to yourself. Let yourself hurt. Let yourself feel what you're going to feel. Okay? Okay. That's pretty much all I have on that. To reiterate, we're all going to experience collective grief at some point. We're all going to experience grief with others at times. And I'm not just talking about, one person passes away and the whole family's upset. I'm talking about large communities, countries, the whole world. We've experienced it already with COVID. We experienced a lot of different grief with that. And more things may come. It seems like pandemics only seem to happen every 100 years or so, but who knows? We could go through another one at some point. So with the way things seem to rapidly change, who knows? But again, I'm always saying educate yourself. Knowing these things even ahead of time is super helpful, because we don't know when the next thing might happen. It could be tomorrow. It could be a year. It may, some huge thing may never happen again. I'm sure it will though. But knowing ahead of time that these things will happen and how to cope with it is key. Okay? Okay. So we have gotten to the end of the episode, and it is time for the Death Deck. Although again this week I'm going to do The end of life deck. All right. Let me get the cards here. Shuffle. Oh, man, I do that a lot. I spilled them everywhere. Okay, well, then I'm just going to grab one at random. Okay. As you approach the end, what would you like to hear? And it's multiple choice or has examples. Podcasts or inspirational words, my favorite music, or ocean or nature sounds. I feel like this could be a fill in the blank, because if there's something totally different than one of those options that you would like to hear, then awesome. Maybe it's the sound of your child's voice talking to you. Maybe it's singing. Maybe it's your church choir. I don't know, but I like that. For me personally, I would have to go with nature sounds. You know me, I'm a hiker. I'm a nature lover. I would just disappear into the woods forever if I could do it. But I like the idea of just hearing birds, little critters running around the forest. One of my most favorite sounds in the world that I even have saved on my phone that I play to go to sleep is the sound of katydids. I don't know what it is about the sound of katydids, but it feels like home. So yeah, that's what I would pick. Okay. I would love to hear what your sound would be. Let me know. Leave a comment on one of my socials or reach out to me through my website. I'm constantly giving you guys that stuff because I want to hear from you. I love you guys. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. And I want to say a huge thank you and shout out to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode, as always. I'm always saying that sometimes reaching out for help is the best thing you can do for yourself. And the folks at BetterHelp are there to help you. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, totally online. So, as I'm always saying, you don't have to wear pants for therapy anymore. It's a new world out there, guys. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. And to get started, you just answer a couple questions about your needs or preferences, and BetterHelp can match you to the right therapist. You can talk to your therapist however is best for you, text, chat, phone, video, whatever you'd like. You can even message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's more convenient for you. If your therapist, for whatever reason, isn't the right fit, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you'll get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist that was just custom-picked for you. More scheduling flexibility and a more affordable price. And you can get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp if you go to betterhelp.com/NikkiTheDeathDoula. And that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/NikkiTheDeathDoula. Awesome. All right, guys, as always, please follow me on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you're hearing, or just straight off my page for this podcast. If you're doing it there, that's fine too. Please follow me, leave a review, leave a comment. I'd like to hear from you. And follow me on my socials. I'm Nikki the Death Doula on Instagram and Facebook. I got rid of Twitter. Sorry, guys. I see no use for it. I have a Threads. I might start posting there. So, yeah, feel free to check that out as well. Follow me there. And if you would like to see any bonus content or get access to these podcasts a little bit early without the ads, then you can do that at patreon.com/NikkiTheDeathDoula. I would love to have your support. As you all know by now, I've left corporate America and I'm on my own. So any support I can get is appreciated and desperately needed. I like eating food and having a roof over my head. It's very nice. Help me continue to do that. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have an amazing week. And remember, as always, your grief is yours. Your feelings are valid. And grief doesn't always have to suck.